At our wedding, my husband's mother pointed at the seating chart and yelled, "Why isn't my name at the head table?" He smiled coldly and replied, "That spot's for people who actually supported us." I leaned toward her and whispered, "Enjoy your table by the restroom. It's where the trash goes." My name is Nicole, and I'm 38 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in a modest but warm craftsman-style home that smells like cedar and coffee grounds. I work as a wedding photographer, a job that's filled my weekends for the last 15 years. I've always loved capturing moments, the kind of fleeting expressions people don't realize they're making. It's in those little flashes that real stories live. Faces contorted with joy, eyes brimming with tears, hands squeezing a little tighter than usual, it all speaks louder than any toast or speech ever could. Odd, isn't it, how someone who's spent her life documenting other people's love stories almost lost her own before it even began? I met Nolan at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was standing by the kitchen counter, sipping a bottle of beer, laughing at something someone had just said. His laugh was deep, rich, and easy. He had this quiet sort of confidence, not flashy, but grounded. The kind that immediately makes you feel like you're safe. We talked about books first, then music, then food, then travel. And before the night ended, we were already making plans to grab brunch that weekend. Not drinks, not dinner, brunch. I liked that. Nolan was 41, a software architect who spent most of his time designing back-end systems for logistics companies, stuff I didn't pretend to understand. But he explained things with such patience and gentleness that it didn't matter. He wasn't trying to impress me. He just wanted to share his world. From the beginning, our connection was slow-burning, steady, sure. He never made big declarations. Instead, he showed up. When my father went into the hospital for surgery, Nolan sat with me in that stiff waiting room for 12 hours. When I got a flat tire on I-26 during a thunderstorm, he left work without a second thought. I used to joke that he was the kind of man who'd hold your hair back if you were sick and rub your back without saying a word. And he did. But love, as I've learned, isn't always about the people in the relationship. Sometimes it's about the people outside of it and what they're willing to do to break it. Nolan's mother, Bernice, was the first storm cloud I ever noticed on our horizon. I met her 7 months into our relationship when Nolan took me to his family's summer home on Lake Lanier. The place was beautiful, stately, quiet, lined with pine trees and the distant sound of jet skis. But from the moment she opened the door, Bernice made it clear I was an unwelcome guest. She looked me up and down in a way that was slow, deliberate, and far from subtle. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, you're Nicole," she said, folding her arms. She didn't ask what I did. She asked, "Is photography something you've always done, or is it more of a side project?" That tone, that delicate, practiced tone of superiority wrapped in faux curiosity. I answered with as much grace as I could, explaining my work, my business, my portfolio. But it didn't matter. She'd already made up her mind. From that weekend forward, it was one microaggression after another. Invitations to family events arrived late, or not at all. Comments about my bohemian lifestyle, subtle jabs at my modest upbringing. I was born and raised in a small town outside Asheville by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. Bernice, on the other hand, came from old Southern money, the kind that had been around for generations. She carried herself like she was royalty, and she viewed anyone outside her world as barely worth acknowledgement. I tried to bridge the gap. I brought her flowers, invited her to lunch. I framed a black and white portrait I had taken of her and Nolan during our first Thanksgiving and sent it as a Christmas gift. She never displayed it. Nolan saw it. He didn't deny it. But he kept hoping it would change. "She's just protective," he said. "It's been just the 2 of us since my dad died." I understood that. I truly did. But what I didn't understand was the way she seemed to enjoy cutting me down, piece by piece. Slowly, quietly, so that I almost began to believe her. When Nolan proposed on a foggy mountaintop trail just as the sun broke through, I said yes with tears in my eyes. I wasn't crying just because I was happy. I was crying because I knew what was coming. Bernice acted like she was thrilled. She congratulated us. She even offered to help pay for part of the wedding. But her smile was strained, her offers conditional. "If we're going to do this right," she said, "you'll need help with the guest list. You wouldn't want to forget anyone important." I should have said no. I should have drawn a line right then. But I was too exhausted to fight. So I nodded and thanked her. I let her believe she was part of it, even as I carefully edited every choice she tried to control. We chose the Ridge for our venue, a place nestled in the mountains with sweeping views and a quiet kind of grandeur. I wanted it to feel like a secret, like a hidden piece of the world carved out just for us. Everything was rustic elegance, eucalyptus garlands, long wooden tables, soft lighting. It was the kind of wedding I'd always wanted, captured in the very style I spent years photographing for others. But even on that day, I felt the shadow of her. She arrived late, trailing perfume and judgment, dressed in a cream-colored gown that could have easily passed as bridal. She made sure to greet every guest with tight smiles and dramatic sighs. She cried loudly during the ceremony, not from joy, but from something else, something that felt like loss and rage disguised as maternal emotion. The reception barn was filled with golden light as the sun began to set. Guests gathered around the entrance to find their names on the oversized seating chart I'd designed by hand. That's when I heard it, her voice, sharp and angry. "Why isn't my name at the head table?" Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. The music hadn't started yet, so her voice carried through the space like a ripple through water. I stood still. Nolan didn't flinch. He turned to her, calm and cold. "That spot's for people who actually supported us." She opened her mouth, stunned. But before she could speak, I walked over. I leaned in close, not smiling. "Enjoy your table by the restroom," I whispered. "That's where the trash goes." She blinked. Her mouth hung open for a moment. Then she turned on her heel and walked away. And just like that, it was done. At least, that's what I thought. But nothing is ever that simple. The rest of the reception played out like a movie I wasn't fully in. I remember the clinking of forks on plates, bursts of laughter from the far side of the room, and the weight of Nolan's hand resting in mine. But in the back of my mind, the confrontation looped like a skipped record. Every few minutes, someone would walk by our table, drop a wink or whisper. That was legendary, like it was some kind of victory. And maybe it was. Maybe for them, it was satisfying to see someone finally standing up to the kind of woman who never got stood up to. But for me, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a fault line had cracked open right in the middle of what should have been the most joyful day of our lives. Still, the night moved on. The toasts were kind. Our first dance felt like a dream. The music swelled around us and Nolan held me close, his breath warm at my temple. We didn't speak much. There wasn't a need to. Guests left slowly, draped in sweaters, arms around each other, some still giddy from the open bar. The candles burned low. I remember standing by the door as the last couple left, staring out at the dusky landscape, thinking, so this is how it starts. With beauty and a little bit of blood. That night, Nolan and I went back to our rented cottage on the edge of town. I didn't take off the dress for hours. We sat on the floor, eating leftover cake with our fingers, not saying much. Eventually, Nolan said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For her. For how she made you feel. For not stopping it sooner." I didn't answer right away. My hands were sticky with frosting. My heart felt heavier than it should have. "I don't want to talk about her," I finally said. "Not tonight." He nodded. And for a while, we didn't. The first week after the wedding was quiet. We went on a short trip to Savannah, walked through old cobblestone streets, took photos of moss-draped oaks, and drank iced coffee by the river. I tried to let the beauty of the place sweep me up. And it did for a little while. Then we came home. I noticed the voicemail the moment we walked in. 3 missed calls from an Atlanta area code. 1 message, 15 seconds long. I didn't listen to it. Nolan did. He was silent for a long time after. When I finally asked, he just said, "She wants to talk." About what? She didn't say. I wasn't surprised. But I was tired. "Do you want to call her back?" "No," he said. "Not yet." But it didn't end there. The messages kept coming. Some were neutral, others were biting. One of them said, "You've changed. She's changing you." Another accused me of poisoning him against his own family. When the messages didn't get her the response she wanted, Bernice went wider. She called Nolan's uncle, his 2 cousins, even his old neighbor from childhood. I know, because they started calling him too. One cousin, Beatrice, a woman I'd only met twice, left a particularly cold voicemail that said, "I don't know what kind of woman isolates a man from his own blood, but it never ends well. It never ends well." That line echoed in my head for days. I tried to pretend it didn't affect me. I buried myself in work. Shot 3 weddings in a row, delivered galleries early, even took on an engagement shoot up in Banner Elk just to stay busy. But every time I got home, the silence in our house rang louder. Nolan, for his part, stayed grounded. He didn't engage. He didn't falter. But I could see it wearing him down, the distance, the tension, the guilt. One night, after dinner, he asked, "Do you think we made a mistake?" I didn't answer right away. "What do you mean?" "Not marrying you," he said quickly. "Never that. Just the wedding, the table, the confrontation." All of it. I leaned back against the sink, arms crossed. No. I think the mistake was thinking anything we did would make her happy. He didn't argue. He just nodded. But the distance between us, however small, was real now. Not because we didn't love each other, but because loving each other had started costing us something. It got worse when his younger brother, Warren, announced his engagement. The wedding was scheduled for the following spring, and the invitation came by mail. It was hand-addressed, elegant, simple. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was only addressed to Nolan. There was no and guest. No, Mr. and Mrs., just Nolan. I waited until he got home from work to show him. He opened the envelope, read it once, then again. His face didn't change, but his hands tightened just slightly at the edges of the card. I guess that's their way of saying it, I said quietly. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, softly, he said, I won't go. You should, I said. He's your brother. No, he said again, more firmly. If they can't respect you, they don't get me. And I loved him for that. But I hated that it came to this. It wasn't about the wedding anymore. It was about something deeper. Something generational. The kind of rot that spread slowly, disguised as tradition and pride. Bernice didn't hate me because of who I was. She hated me because I didn't fit into her idea of what Nolan's life should look like. I wasn't from her world. I didn't bend. I didn't apologize for my roots. And now we were paying the price. The worst part wasn't the estrangement. It wasn't even the silence. It was the in-between moments. The way Nolan sometimes stared out the window a little too long. The way he hesitated before saying no when I asked if he was okay. The way I started wondering if love, even the kind that burned steady and sure, could survive being chipped away piece by piece. I didn't want to ask the question out loud, but it was there. Every time we turned off the lights. Every time we sat through dinner with nothing left to say. Every time we got another message that neither of us had the energy to listen to. Winter rolled in with a kind of quiet heaviness that seemed to match the mood in our home. The holidays were approaching, and with them came a sense of dread I couldn't quite shake. This was supposed to be our first married Christmas. A time to start our own traditions. Bake cookies, hang stockings, maybe even argue over which movie counted as a holiday classic. But instead, everything felt weighed down by the silence from Nolan's side of the family. He didn't get a single invitation. No dinner. No, hope you'll come. Not even a card. I could tell he was trying not to let it get to him. He kept himself busy, fixing little things around the house, reorganizing his office, overworking, offering to run every errand just to have somewhere to go. But at night, after he thought I'd fallen asleep, I'd feel him shift beside me. Awake. Restless. One night, I found him on the couch at 2 a.m, scrolling through old family photos on his laptop. There were pictures from beach vacations, birthdays, Thanksgivings. All of them featured Bernice, beaming, arms wrapped tightly around her 2 sons. Nolan looked different in those photos, lighter, easier. Like someone who hadn't learned yet that love could be so conditional. You miss them, I said gently from the doorway. He jumped a little, startled, then gave a slow nod. Yeah, I do. He closed the laptop and sat back, scrubbing his hand down his face. I keep thinking maybe if I'd handled it differently, if I'd said it better, or pulled her aside, or... I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have blown up like that. I walked over, sat beside him, and rested my hand on his knee. It was going to happen eventually, I said. She just didn't want to make room for someone new in her story. He stared ahead, eyes tired. But it wasn't just her. It was everyone. They all fell in line. And that was the truth. It wasn't just Bernice. It was the whole infrastructure she'd built around herself, the web of loyalty and expectation. Once she turned cold, they followed. Maybe out of fear. Maybe out of habit. We didn't decorate that year. We didn't even put up a tree. Instead, we flew to Portland to visit my mom, who cried when she saw us and made entirely too much food. We sat around her tiny kitchen table with chipped plates and mismatched silverware, laughing over burnt rolls and watery cider, and for the first time in weeks, Nolan seemed to breathe. I like it here, he said quietly on our 3rd night. It's loud and chaotic and weird, but it feels like home. After that trip, something shifted. Nolan started seeing a therapist. Quietly. He didn't tell me right away. I found the appointment card in his coat pocket one day while doing laundry. When I asked about it, he just said, I needed someone to talk to who wasn't you. Not because I don't trust you, just because I don't want to put all of this on you. It made sense. And it helped. He started coming home lighter. Not cheerful, exactly, but more present. He started making dinner again. Started asking questions about my work, about my clients, my plans. It was small, but it mattered. Then one day, he brought home an envelope. A letter. From Bernice. He didn't say much. Just handed it to me and sat down at the kitchen table. I read it once. Then again. It was 3 pages long, typed, dated, and signed. There were no direct apologies, no, I'm sorry, or I was wrong. But there were phrases like, I didn't handle things the way I should have, and I let my fear of losing my son color how I saw you. She wrote about her grief after Nolan's father died. About how hard it was raising 2 boys alone. About the years she spent building a life that made sense and how quickly it all seemed to unravel the moment Nolan chose someone she didn't expect. She wrote, I don't know if we'll ever see eye to eye, but I don't want to lose him. And that means learning to respect you, even if I never fully understand you. It wasn't warm, but it was honest. In her own way, it was an olive branch. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. What do you want to do? I asked him. I don't know, he said. I'm glad she wrote it. But I don't trust that it's not just another performance. I nodded. Me neither. So we sat with it. Didn't rush. Didn't call. Instead, we let life keep happening. We started planning a trip to Italy, something we'd always talked about but never had the time for. I booked new clients, launched a print shop for some of my landscape work, even got a small write-up in a regional magazine. Nolan got a promotion. We started talking about buying a bigger house, maybe even having a kid. But underneath all of that, beneath the success, the movement was this persistent ache. Like a bruise that hadn't fully healed. It came back strongest during milestones. When I won an award for a photo essay on Appalachian weddings, I wanted to call someone and tell them. Not just my mother, someone from Nolan's world. Someone who might be proud of me. But there was no one to call. When Nolan's birthday rolled around, a single card arrived in the mail. It wasn't signed. Just typed words, stiff and vague. Hope your day is special. Thinking of you. We both knew who it was from. He tossed it in the drawer and didn't bring it up again. Still, we moved forward. A year passed, then another. We started talking more openly about the future, about what kind of parents we'd want to be, what kind of life we could build without waiting for approval that would never come. There were good days. So many good days. Laughter, love, intimacy, shared glances over crowded rooms. But the damage was still there. In both of us. And neither of us fully knew what to do with it. Time has a funny way of bringing things around. By the 3rd year of our marriage, things were steady. Not perfect, never perfect, but stable in that quiet, mature way that comes after weathering a storm together. Nolan and I had built something strong. Not just a relationship, but a rhythm. We knew how to take care of each other now, even in silence. We bought the house on the ridge, the one with the wide porch and the creaky stairs and the fireplace that made the whole place smell like old cedar. It wasn't huge. It didn't need to be. But it was ours. I started teaching weekend photography workshops. Nolan finally built the home office he'd always talked about. There were small joys every day, the way the morning light hit our kitchen table, the trail near the back of the property where we walked after dinner, the sound of Nolan humming while he made coffee. We didn't talk much about his family anymore. But then came the news. Bernice had sold the lake house. Apparently, she was downsizing, moving into a luxury condo complex closer to the city, one that catered to the active senior lifestyle. Book clubs, wine tastings, golf carts with monogrammed seat covers. The lake house, as it turned out, was going on the market. Nolan heard about it through a friend of his late father's, a man named Russell who still kept in touch. He called us one evening, out of the blue, with a bit of a gleeful tone. Looks like Bernice is finally parting with the old place. Shame. That house has history. History indeed. That house had been a stage for so many of her performances, where she held court, judged guests, controlled the narrative. Where she first made it known to me that I would never be one of them. Now, she was letting it go. It didn't take long for Nolan and I to decide. We put in an offer through a third party. No names, no hints. Just a competitive cash offer, slightly over asking, handled by an agent who didn't blink twice. The market was hot and Bernice wanted a quick sale. Within 3 weeks, it was ours. When the paperwork closed, I remember Nolan holding the keys in his hand, sitting on our porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. She's going to find out eventually, he said. I know. Do you care? I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No, let her. We didn't move in. We didn't remodel. We kept it almost exactly as it had been, same wood-paneled walls, same dock, same faded swing on the back porch. But we did one thing. We turned it into a retreat. Specifically, a retreat for women creatives, photographers, writers, designers, looking for space, silence, and inspiration. I launched it quietly under the name Ridge and River Retreats. I didn't use my name on the site. I didn't advertise it widely. But within 6 months, it was fully booked for the next year. Every weekend, new women came through those doors, women who'd spent their lives being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. They worked on their craft, walked the lake trails, held circles by the fire pit. And slowly, they left little marks, notes on the corkboard, sketches in the guest book, pieces of themselves layered into the house that had once made me feel small. It wasn't just healing. It was reclamation. The best part came a year later, on a breezy April afternoon, when I walked down to the mailbox at the retreat and found a letter addressed to the owner of 49, Arrowhead Drive. It was from Bernice. Handwritten, in neat, looping cursive. It read, "I don't know if you'll read this, but I was recently told who purchased the house. I won't pretend I understand why. I won't ask for anything. But I will say this, I hope you've made it into something good. Something better than I did." I sat on the porch swing, the same swing she once sat in while criticizing the way I wore my hair, and I smiled. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because I had made it better. Not just the house. Everything. Nolan and I didn't need an apology. We didn't need a reconciliation. What we had was our life, the one we built in spite of every attempt to make us doubt it. And now, the house that had once been a monument to her control had become a sanctuary for people she would never understand. That was the victory. Not loud. Not cruel, but enduring.